Hey, I'm ZSH Plays. Welcome to Bellemont Zoo as you've never seen it before. Today we're going to be building a Zoo Nights experience in order to transform the zoo into a wonderland of nighttime lights. Let's go! Zoo nights are very popular in zoos, and the addition of some of the new lighting pieces in the Asia Animal Pack inspired me to try and create one for Bellemont Zoo. If you're not familiar with the concept, essentially the zoo opens again after it closes. Each zoo does them differently, but typically they fall into two different types, either taking place in the evening during summer, when it's still pretty much light, no children allowed, drinks served and things like that, or it takes place in the evening in winter when it's already dark and it's all about light shows and the experience. The way I want it to work in Bellemont Zoo is that it would run through September, open about 6 p.m, so people would enter the zoo just as the sun was starting to go down and then stay till maybe 8 or 9 when it's completely dark. The zoo will be lit up in spectacular fashion and there'll be all sorts of extra stuff for the guests to see as well, along with some of the animals. Very excited to show you the final results of this, something we've never seen before on the channel. So what are we doing here? Well, the Zoo Nights experience begins, as you would expect, in the zoo's entrance plaza, and that means we need to finish the entrance plaza. We started building this way back in episode 1 when we put the penguins in, and we've added lots of stuff around it since then, but we've never really finished the area itself. So what we're going to do is build 3 new things in here, all of which will function both during the Zoo Nights experience and during the day. And the first one that we're building here is a fish pond. This is inspired by the entrance to Zoo Leipzig, where they have a really cool koi carp pond in the entrance, and I want this to provide a focal point and a meeting point for guests before they get to the koala house. Being very careful with the positioning here. We don't want it to spoil the view down to the Madagascar house, because that's really important. The reason it's taken so long to get to finishing the plaza is it means deleting some of these paths, and oh my god, this pathing took so long to do, but it's time to take the plunge. Before we get the paths in, we need to add the water in so that we can then run the paths around it. So we're going to do basically what we did with the tanuki habitat last week, and I said last week that it was really random whether the game would let you move each pole downwards or not. And this kind of proves that because it worked perfectly on the fish pond. So we've got the water in exactly where we want it, and we can start to run the paths around the pond and then fill them back in on the rest of the area, and then, like we did before, just cover up any gaps with the rustic decals. You can see the struggle here. Creating a large area of pathing that isn't square is probably one of the hardest things to do in Planet Zoo, but eventually we'll get there. And then we're going to lower some of the walls so that we've got proper viewing into the fish pond. Won't be any fish in here, of course, although we will be using some of Drax's koi models hidden away under water lilies, etc. So you can't really see them, but there's just a suggestion that they're there. We're going to build a little island in the middle of the pond now, featuring the zoo's logo, which is all going to be lit up during the Zoo Nights experience. Just using the European marquee beam to create the sides of it. And then we'll fill it in with the smallest mulch pieces so we can get loads of plants in here. Want this to be really vibrant when it's finished, so we've got the logo lit up and then it's surrounded by beautiful plants and flowers, and there'll be a kind of riverbank effect on the edge as well, with this kind of zigzag curve made using some more of the marquee beams. This very thin metal edge to the land parts of the fish pond is taken directly from the one at Zoo Leipzig, so I thought it was a really interesting look. And then we can start filling it in with foliage, using a mixture of the sunken ponytail palm as always, and a plant I discovered during the Tierra del Fuego build, which is the cabbage tree, which if you sink it down does a really good job of providing some more plants like this. And as I've said many times before on the channel, it's perfectly possible to get really nice tropical looking planting like this outside in Europe. Zoos do it all the time. I just got back from Chester Zoo, and I was reminded again of how amazing the planting is in that zoo. It's like you're in a jungle half of the time, even though you're outside in the north of England. We'll drop some water lilies in, and then we'll move Drax koi models underneath the water lilies. So if you look closely, there's just a suggestion there's some fish in here, although they won't move, of course, sadly. And that is the fish pond and all the architecture of the entrance plaza completed. And as the sun sets over the plaza, we can move on to creating Zoo Nights. The first thing we're going to build is a photo point. This will be here so that guests can take a selfie in front of it during the day, and then it will be lit up at night so they can take photos of it. So it's going to be one of the first things people see at the Zoo Nights. So it needs to be big and it needs to be 3-dimensional. So we're actually going to use the Boogaloo font, possibly for the first time ever on this channel. It is not a font I like, but it's got that kind of big friendly friendly vibe that zoos like for things like this, and most importantly, it's three-dimensional. So we'll use that for the word zoo, and then we'll use the 2D fonts and then just copy them behind each other a load of times to make the smaller letters. The hashtag, gotta have a hashtag for signs like this, actually glows. It's one of the new pieces from the most recent update. We'll colour some of them black so we get a bit of a drop shadow on it. Do the same thing with the larger letters and colour those to match the zoo's logo. We'll put a vista point in so that guests will actually come and visit this, and then it's onto the new pieces. So we've got these new neon edged pieces from the Asia Animal Pack. I said these were going to be really useful in the overview, and this is exactly what I had in mind for them. We're going to create a border all the way around the larger letters with the smallest 0.25 of a metre piece. We'll trace the edge of the letter Z with these pieces, making sure to follow it really closely. I'm really glad the word zoo only has 3 letters in it and 2 of them the same, because that took a long time. Just one more piece here to complete the Z, and then we can do the first of the O's and then just copy it across to the next one. Now it will glow at night, and we'll see that at the end of the video. This is the centerpiece of the Zoo Nights experience, the Swan Lake with the Madagascar house behind it. And we're going to transform it into a water and light experience inspired by Disney's Animal Kingdom. So the first thing we're going to do is light this statue with a mixture of pinks and blues and position the lights in such a way that each animal is a different colour. So we're going to have a kind of purpley pink for the 2 deer on the side, and then we're going to have a blue for the lion and the gorilla. I really like that kind of hot and cold colour palette, always works nicely for light shows. I've never actually been to Animal Kingdom. I'm basing this on some research that I did this week, but I would love to go there. They don't have the best animal collection, but they've probably got the best theming of any zoo in the world. It'd be an amazing thing to see. We'll just position the last of these lights. You can see where it's going here. Obviously it'll be a lot more spectacular at night. And then we're going to use a really fiery red to illuminate the big willow trees that we've got behind the lake. And we're just going to position these spotlights around till we get the trees to look exactly the way that we want them to. Once you've got it rotated into the right way, if you switch to the world axis, it makes it much easier to move. I remember really struggling with these spotlights when I first started playing the game. And then we're going to move on to some more new pieces from the Asia Animal Pack. I'm pretty sure in my overview I said I would never use these pieces, and here we are 2 weeks later, but they're absolutely perfect for this. In the central light show at nighttime in Disney's Animal Kingdom, they have these giant floats of glowing flowers with fountains and things like that. We don't have room for anything quite that spectacular in Bellemont Zoo, but we're going to replicate that, creating little floating islands of light with these. Next up, we're going to create some subtle ground lighting around the lake so that people don't just walk into it when it's dark. And then we'll move on to lighting the rest of the zoo. So lighting the zoo isn't something I've really bothered with, simply because I never play it at night, and it just adds an extra layer of things that need to be done throughout the entire zoo, which makes everything take longer. But now that we're going to have a Zoo Nights experience, suddenly lighting the zoo becomes worthwhile. And with this being a classic European zoo, we've got some amazing lampposts in the base game that we can use to do that without having to create a load of custom lighting. We've done the main path down to the Madagascar house. I'm even going to put some in the park at the back of the zoo. I get a lot of questions about this park. Can we turn it into part of the zoo so that we can expand it and get more animals in? And the answer is no, because I had a big issue with San Bernardino Zoo where once it started to get to the size that it eventually reached, even when I was paused, the frame rate was really bad and it was not fun to build in, and I was determined that Belmont Zoo wouldn't get as big as that, which is why I chose a small city zoo for this project, and I intend to keep it that way. We will not be expanding it into the park. Back in the entrance plaza, we're making sure that the Explorer's Fountain is nice and visible at night as well as during the day, and then we're going to move on to the tree that sits in the plaza as well and put some string lights all over the branches. These are really tricky to place, but once you get them lined up nicely with the branches, it looks absolutely amazing at night. Some of the stuff that we're adding here, like these lights, will always be in the zoo, they just be on at night, and some of the zoo night stuff is going to only be visible during zoo nights, and we're going to do a sneaky little trick later on to make that really easier to achieve, so we can basically turn zoo nights on and off. Next up, we're going to add loads more lighting into Cafe Belmont using the sunken lights that we put in here originally. A few more lights on the inside of the restaurant. We're going to put candles down on the tables, probably those fake candles I would imagine IRL. Don't really want any naked flames in the zoo, apart from one, which we're going to add at the end of the video. And then we'll move on to the Japanese garden we created last week. This is going to be another one of the parts of the zoo that is open for zoo nights, because the tanuki are primarily nocturnal, so this is going to give the guests a great chance to see them. one with some fairly subtle lighting in their habitat and some not so subtle lighting around the garden, so it stands out. And then we're going to move from the red of Japan to a much cooler blue for the life in cold blood reptile and amphibian house, which will be open during this experience as well. Guests don't normally have access to the entire zoo when real zoos do stuff like this, presumably because it's much harder to manage guests at night, and also the expense of putting these kind of lights everywhere. And then we'll move on to building something which is sorely lacking in the zoo at the moment, which is food and drink stands. Beverages are a big part of these experiences, and we're going to start with a slushie stand with optional alcohol. And before the zoo is finished, we can start copying variations on this design all around the zoo to get a lot more of this kind of thing in here, because at the moment, Cafe Bellemont is the only place to eat and drink in the zoo. Just haven't found the time to add a load of these in. So we're going to get a really nice one built now, and we're going to build all of it out of Flexicolor pieces. So in future, we can copy these around the zoo and update the look of them to fit in with whatever area they're going to be in. This one is going to be yellow to match the koala house behind it. I'm using one of the picnic table parasols as the roof. It just fitted really nicely. And then we'll build around that with lots of Flexicolor wood pieces from the Twilight and Tropical packs. We need a kind of false wall here to cover up the central stand for the parasol. That's going to look weird if it's in there. We'll put one of the little African doors in so it looks like they can actually get in and out, even though they jump over the counter to get in the game. We've got some of the fabrics from the America's Animal pack at the front and the sides. We'll use some air conditioning ducts to create the metal countertop for our vendor here. We'll put some more of the new LED pieces underneath it so it's bright and it can be seen from the other side of the plaza when the guests first come in to zoo nights. Some of the string lights at the top, and then finally some of the conservation lights to make sure that these menus, which are based on one of Lion's blueprints as always, are nice and visible at night. And once those are in, that's our little generic food and drink stand done. Now we can move on to something which I saw at London Zoo, toasting marshmallows on an open fire. This is such a cute idea. Normally an open flame is absolutely the last thing you'd want in a zoo, but with these events being adults only and closely supervised, a little marshmallow toasting station is a great idea. We've got this little open fire already. We're going to put some picnic tables around it, and then these lampshades from the conservation pack, which are quite cutesy, fit well with the theme, and then some little spikes for people to put the marshmallows on, with a few of them actually in the fire as well. And then we can move on to the final stage of the build. The area that the Zoo Nights experience will cover will go from the entrance plaza and the penguins at the bottom of the screen, through the koala house, the Swan Lake, Gibbons, Madagascar house, all the way up to the Life in Cold Blood exhibit, and then round through the Japanese garden and Cafe Bellemont, ending in the Gharials and then onto the zoo's exit. And in order to keep people where we want them to be, we'll be placing barriers across the parts of the zoo that they won't be allowed access to. It'd be great to use the guest barriers for this, so the guests can't get into those parts of the zoo, but unfortunately because they block the staff as well, all the animals are going to starve, so we'll just put these in as a kind of visual guide. And as we place each one of these barriers down, along with all the visual elements that we don't want to be visible in the zoo during the daytime, we're keeping them all in the same group. And we're going to put a big sign down here saying Zoo Nights, and if we sync this underground, whenever we want to activate Zoo Nights, all we need to do is click on that sign under the photo booth and then drag it up or down, and all the elements for Zoo Nights will appear and disappear with a single click. And that's everything we need to do. Let's check out Zoo Nights at Bellemont Zoo. We'll start in early evening as the first guests arrive for Zoo Nights. And here it is in the dark. Lighting in the plaza working really nicely. Here's the penguin cam. The guests are actually photographing the photo point, which is awesome. And here's the slushie stand. Let's move over to the next part of the zoo. We've got a view from the gibbon habitat here towards the centerpiece, the Swan Lake. Love the lighting on the Madagascar house. Let's check out the lake. This looks so atmospheric with the guests walking around and all the lights. I think the central statue with these floating flower islands around it is my favourite part. But you can also see the blue of the Life in Cold Blood exhibit at the back as well. Here it is. Open as well, so we've got our Asian water monitor in here. And then the Japanese garden. You can see one of our tanuki just exiting their little house here to explore their habitat. If the gharial is still awake, you'd be able to see those as well. And then finally, grab yourself a toasted marshmallow and then sit down in Cafe Bellemont and maybe get something more substantial to eat. And that's Zoo Nights. This is where we started today, lot of work done, this is where we are now. Next week we're going to be building the penultimate habitat at Bellemont Zoo for one of my favourite animals. Thank you so much for watching. As always, thank you to all of you who've joined the Explorers Club. Hit the join button on the channel if you want to see your name up here, and I'll see you again soon for some more Planet Zoo. Bye.